It's okay. Wish could have been more Marvel characters.
I read the plot section on Wikipedia for Captain America 4. Then I read the cast section of the same article, and it had a bunch of characters who weren't mentioned in the plot section. Is that good?
This is a bit of mess. Very eye buoys that is was reshot.
The last reviewer is a hater. Captain America Brave New World is in theaters, and if you couldn't tell by the reviews at the beginning, people have thoughts. So do we. We're going to share them in this video. Welcome back to Movies Good, Internet Bad. I'm Corey. That's Shane. Go ahead and subscribe if you like movies and TV. And Shane, I have a feeling that we're not going to 100% see eye to eye in this video, but for different reasons than people might think.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
So you're not a Marvel person.
No, I am
That's not
not a
your
Marvel
bag.
person at
Yeah,
all. I like a few of them. I haven't liked many of them recently, but I go
fair.
and see them just so that we can talk about them because I know that you really enjoy Marvel and I like to keep up with the times. So I did see this one.
Yeah. So without diving into spoilers, we can save those for a couple minutes from now. What are your general thoughts on this film?
I think Brave New World is, in some ways, a perfect encapsulation of what this is because it's very brave to make a movie whose script hinges on a third act reveal that is in all of the trailers and posters and toys.
Ah,
The entire movie is built around the reveal of the Red Hulk being a surprise, and yet it was the primary marketing material for the
hmm,
entire film,
yeah.
which is hilarious. It makes no sense at all to do that. It's also very brave to make a sequel to the 2008 Incredible Hulk movie that nobody cared about, and you have since recasted the Incredible Hulk, and in this movie recasted the other character from that movie who is important.
Yeah. Little strange. I don't know. Like you it's frustrating. It's almost hard to even come up with the right way to say it. But like the Sam Wilson character deserves better than being slotted into a movie where the protagonist that they wanted they can't use because of rights issues.
Yeah, it's a very strange, like, it almost doesn't even feel like a Captain America movie at all.
No.
It feels like a totally different movie that Anthony Mackie is playing Captain America in. The movie doesn't really hinge around his character development whatsoever, aside from a few like brief moments of like dramatically delivered dialogue where he's talking about themes and stuff. But
Yeah.
that all happens in like the end of the movie, and there's no build up to it. So there may have been a different movie somewhere along the way that was more around his character and his growth throughout. But
Well,
it wasn't
Shane,
the movie that eventually came out.
let's talk about that because this movie shot God knows how long ago at this point because it went through several delays, right? Between the writer's strike and then Marvel kind of took a pause as a company and then only released one movie last year, which was the Deadpool movie, which isn't even really part of the MCU. And then there were 22 full days of reshoots that were done last summer to change the story around, take some characters out, put some other characters in, and apparently that was largely due to poor test screenings because Marvel their whole mo is please the audience, right? They don't
Yeah.
give a shit what the critics have to say. They want to make their core audience happy, and it seemed like they hadn't done that at the beginning, so they went back. They got a big name like Giancarlo Esposito to come in and play a character. Feels like three different movies kind of smashed into one. That being said, I didn't fully hate it the way that I think you did. And
Okay.
I think that there are a handful of good actors that are in this movie that are doing the best they can with the material that they've got.
Yeah, I would
Um,
agree with that.
like Anthony Mackie is very good. Harrison
Yeah.
Ford is very good.
Hmm.
Carl Lumley, who plays Isaiah Bradley, is very good. And when they're given the moments to have emotion and bring those themes through, you can tell it's all there, right? But a lot of that stuff is stuff that you can tell was from the first batch of filming, and then it's kind of oddly strung together by all these things that, like, not just in tone but in the way that they look. The scenes all look very different from the stuff that you could tell was from principal photography, which is probably because of the fact that whenever you go into 3 full weeks of reshoots, you're not going to get the same level of budget and crew and all that other kind of stuff that you normally get. So, Marvel, that's always kind of been their thing. Is, we'll shoot a movie, we'll reshoot it a little bit, we'll tinker with it all the way until the end. But this one feels like it was hamstrung by that more than some of the others.
Yeah, it's a movie created by focus groups, and this is always the detriment of what we talk about with Marvel, is that it's all about, top down. You get a director who is just a yes man, basically, to come in and do this type of stuff, and you lose a lot of the creative vision behind it. It didn't feel like there was a unifying theme or vision whatsoever for this movie. There's no visual flair at all. The whole movie looks like a Netflix film where it's just like people on green screens with CGI vehicles or explosions. Like, nothing feels real. There's a scene halfway through the movie where Giancarlo Esposito is fighting Anthony Mackie, and it's like on a residential street with like CGI trucks that are blowing up, and it's very clearly like fake fire and CG everything. I'm like, were they even anywhere near each other while filming this scene? Like, you could have shot this with stunt doubles and like across multiple different days. Nothing looked real at all. There was no weight to any of it. It's just a CGI mess. The same thing happens in the spoiler alert, I guess.
Sure,
There's
let's do spoilers. Yeah, why not?
there's a there's a pivotal scene where they're in this like naval fight around the celestial island from Eternals, which they have now mentioned again. I guess they remembered that something exists.
Check that
Yeah,
box, baby.
yeah. I think this is something that they added too, probably, because they were like, oh, people are wondering about what happened to that Eternals thing that popped up, so let's make it a plot point. But like all of the jets in that movie, especially when you compare it to the last movie that Danny Ramirez was in, Top Gun Maverick,
Mm.
uh, it looks so much worse than that movie. Everything looks fake. The jets are clearly CG. They don't move how jets would move. Nothing moves the way it should move. But it's just like CGI slop. And they do the same thing that Wicked did, where all of the light sources are oddly glowy. Like,
A lot of
and
backlit,
so, yes,
haloing. Yeah,
backlit, like lens flare into the camera mess. And I think they do that to hide compositing. Like, it's easier to hide the differences between what you shot and the green screen behind them
yeah,
when you
that's
use
fair.
stuff like that. And in a movie where it's like only that, it just comes across as looking pretty ugly.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to piece together how it ended up looking the way that it does, and it's got to be stretching the budget because of the reshoots or whatever.
Yeah, has
So
to be.
I
Yep.
I don't know. I saw, there were folks saying there was this many reshoots, there's that many reshoots, this person was here, this person's not there, and it's just, whenever you have something like that, it's really hard to dig yourself out of that hole, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when you look at something like, even if you want to stay on the Marvel side of things, season 2 of Loki had a script, it had actors, they shot it, and that was it. They didn't do
Hmm.
any reshoots for that. And that season is really good. It's
Yeah.
really strong, and
Yeah.
it works because there's an idea, they execute upon it, and they stick to it. And I think that, I fear that we're at a place with Marvel movies right now where they're so scared of pissing off the audience that they go in and they make all these changes because they're afraid that the movie's not going to sit well. Which, it seems odd, because when you have a model where you release 3 movies and 2 TV shows a year, like, maybe it's okay that one doesn't hit with one audience and one doesn't hit with another, because 2 months later there's going to be something else that comes out that might resonate with those people. It feels like they talk about how they're trying to diversify, but then everything ends up going back into the same lane, which is strange.
Yeah. And I think the issue here is that if you try to play it that safe and try and make it as broad appeal as possible, it just comes across not really appealing to anybody.
Yeah,
Like, at the end of the day, who is this movie really, like, who's getting really excited about it? I would assume most of the
I don't
reaction is
know.
going to be very lukewarm. Like that was fine, even from people that enjoyed it. And like this is kind of your reaction, right? Like you didn't hate it, but like you're
I
not going to go say, "Oh, you got to go see Captain
no,
America," right?
no.
And
I think that it's one of those movies that it's okay or good. It's nowhere near great, you know, and it's nothing. It's hard to make the comparison to the other Captain America movies because it's a different time in the MCU. It's a different crew. It's a different cast and everything. But like you look at those movies, and at the end of First Avenger, Steve Rogers is in a very different place than he started, both physically and emotionally.
mhm,
At the end of Winter Soldier, his worldview is expanded upon, and he realizes that the world that he woke up in after being in the ice is really not the world that he thought it was. And then at the end of Civil War, he has a falling out with his best friend and with his partner in this whole thing, which is Tony Stark, right? And in this movie, there is no character arc for Sam
no,
Wilson.
no, there's not.
And that frustrates me because I love the Sam Wilson character. The Sam Wilson character in the comic books is really good. Anthony Mackie is a great actor. They laid a pretty good foundation for him in the Disney Plus show that they did, which is all about will America accept a black man as Captain America?
Yep.
And then in this movie, they're like, yeah, they did. Okay. And they just
Yeah.
move on to Incredible Hulk stuff, which
Yep.
doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think I can forgive bad CG. I can forgive silly little cameo things and baiting people with trailers and whatnot. But what I have a hard time forgiving is taking a character that should be well written and well executed and then kind of giving him nothing to do
Yeah.
other than punch and kick and be charismatic, which he's very good at all those things. But I want more from the lead character of the movie than just that surface level stuff.
Yeah, there's a version of this movie that I think exists somewhere on a cutting room floor where the president doesn't fully trust Sam Wilson because he's not Steve Rogers, and that is
Yeah.
the through line throughout the entire movie is them working together in the end to figure out that okay, Sam Wilson actually has a lot of advantages that Steve Rogers did not have. And they kind of touch on that with Bucky's scene in the end, but it's so surface level and not built up to that there's no payoff there.
Hmm.
But yeah, like you said, there's no arc for Captain America in this movie. He starts and ends in the exact same place
Yep.
and says a couple lines about how he's changed, but we don't
Yep.
see any of that at all. He's the same person.
His whole thing is I need to be better, and I should have taken the serum. Which
Yeah.
everyone
What was
tells
that
you,
line?
everyone tells him over and over and over again, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
The serum is not what makes you. You are what makes you. And then he's like, I should have taken the serum. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I know that it's probably done in the sake of being funny or tongue in cheek or whatever, because that's again another Marvel trope is that anything serious has to be undercut with some form of humor. But I just there is a good movie in here somewhere, and it just got Swiss
Yeah.
cheese to hell in post production and reshoots and everything. That
I just like I don't
tough.
understand. It's such a layup of a plot that you could have
Yeah.
that like how did it get this convoluted? So let me see if I'm making sense of this plot correctly. That the master villain's plan was he was imprisoned. By the way, he looks like Alan Rickman in Galaxy Quest in this movie, like the big brain thing.
Yeah, he
But
doesn't look like that
anyways,
in the comics at all, really. But
so his master plan, because he was imprisoned and like forced to work on medical stuff, whatever. His master plan was to slowly, over the course of however many years, uh, put increase the gamma radiation in Ross through his pills
yeah,
that would
for
convert
his
him
heart.
into the Hulk, that he would then at some point become president, and then he would use that gamma radiation to expose him as the Hulk. And to do that, he starts a geopolitical war, not to kill anyone, but just to make him angry enough to switch into the Red Hulk.
Yeah,
Am I getting that correctly?
I think for the most part you are, and
Why?
I I maybe the whole melodrama of watching somebody fall from the highest point possible. I don't really know for
There's
sure,
a
but
shortcut method that is explained in the movie that you can just hypnotize people with their phone and then make them do whatever you want.
right.
You
You could
don't
have
need to
had
slowly drug him over the course of 10 years. You could just hypnotize him.
Ross kill the Japanese prime minister
Yeah, exactly. And
by
he's done,
hypnotizing,
right?
right? And then he's finished. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little strange, but the strange thing about all that is that like they brought back this character, the which his name is Samuel Stearns, and his comic book villain name is the Leader. Uh, like great actor, cool character from the comics, but you haven't seen him in 17 years, and because of that, the whole beginning of the movie has to info dump anyone who hasn't seen that movie or hasn't seen it in a long time, and they have to hit you over the head with all the information. And I get that Marvel is a connected thing and their stories are supposed to all intertwine, but I feel like there's got to be a more organic way to show that kind of stuff. Or if there isn't, just do something different. You know, have the leader there. That's fine because the leader's a cool character and villains are villains, and a villain doesn't have to be arbitrarily attached to any one hero, right?
Right.
But just do something related to Captain America. Maybe make the leader a horribly racist person who wants to
Mhm.
do anything within his power to get rid of a black Captain America. And there's a perfectly awful person to be a villain, right?
It is quite funny that the villain is actually not against Captain America, like, at all in the
No,
movie.
he's
Like,
against
they
the
don't
president.
fight at all. He just, comes in and gives himself up, and then Captain America, saves the day. I thought that was, yeah, stupid. The exposition dumps were atrocious in the first third of this movie. I think the very first line of the movie is Harrison Ford going like, I think his I think Betty is the name, right? Is Betty
Hmm.
the name? He's like, "Have
Yeah.
you heard from Betty?" And he might as well have turned to the audience and said, "My daughter." It's like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Like, you just have to explain everything. And then it's like he gives this speech about what happened, and then they have a news dump of
Hmm.
what has happened in the Incredible Hulk movie. And then every new character you meet, they have to recite the name of the character like directly to them. It's like, well, they know their own name. He
Yeah.
walks up to the Japanese prime minister and he's like, "Hello, Japanese prime minister," whatever his name is. I'm like, is that how you greet people?
Yeah. And that's it's bad, but it's not symptomatic to just Marvel. There
No.
are tons of movies these days that treat the audience as if they're a bunch of complete morons, and
Hmm.
they hit people over the head with information that would be easy to figure out if you actually took your eyeballs and pointed them at the movie screen and just watch what's happening.
Yeah. And
That's all you
yeah,
have to do,
this
right?
happens in so many things. And I think I made the same remark about like the Mandalorian season 3. And there's this one episode where they blow up Bo Katan's castle, and she's looking at it and she exclaims, "They blew up my home." It's like,
Yeah, like
we are
yeah, I
watching it
know. We're
happen.
watching it.
Exact same thing. Everything that occurs, somebody has to explain what they're looking at so that we make sure the audience is on board every time. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's insulting to the audience's intelligence. I think part of this stuff is a symptom of streaming movies and people just acknowledging that people are not locked in when watching
Yeah.
streaming movies, and
Yep.
they're paying attention to 20 other things. So they have to, if they miss something, they have to make sure they're still explaining to the audience what's
Hmm.
happening so that they don't
Yeah.
lose them.
There was that big
Uh,
article about how Netflix requires that in
Correct.
scripts right now, and it
Yep.
makes big. They're oh well, people are doing their laundry while watching Netflix, so you have to like audibly explain what's going on
Correct.
because their eyes
Correct.
might not be on. Okay, sure, that's TV. This is a movie where your whole business model behind it is somebody gets in the car, drives to the movie theater, puts their phone down, and just watches the movie. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to treat them like they're that dumb. And if they are that dumb, that's their own fault.
Yeah.
Like, sorry,
Yeah.
that's just a huge. It's an epidemic in blockbuster cinema right now, and there's very few directors out there right now that have the stroke to be able to say to a studio, "No, we're not going to do that."
Yeah, because that's 100% a studio note. Writers are not writing it like that. Studio heads are coming in and saying, "No, you need to explain this. You need to explain this," and so then it ends up in the movie. But it's just it comes across horribly every time. Like the golden rule of exposition is never tell anyone a character or never tell a character anything that they already know.
Yep.
And this movie is just ripe with it. Like the very first line, "Have you heard from Betty, my daughter?" She knows that that's your daughter. You just have to say, "Have you heard from Betty?" And even if the audience doesn't quite know in that moment that that's his daughter, they're thinking like, who is Betty? And then maybe we explain that later, or you see a
They'll piece it
photo, or
together during the
there's a
movie.
flashback, or something like that. That's
Yep.
another thing that was dumb, is that the whole emotional arc of this movie for Harrison Ford's character is like reconnecting with his daughter, and we don't see the daughter in the whole movie until the very end, and it's just Liv
Hmm.
Tyler for 20 seconds, and then the scene's over.
Yeah, you hear her on the phone
Mm-hmm.
once, and
Yep.
then you see her at the prison
Yep.
for a minute, maybe
Yeah.
at the
There,
most.
like you could have set it up in the beginning where he's walking with her in the cherry blossoms, and he's remembering the good times that he had with his daughter, and that's his
Sure.
happy place, because then in the end, when we end up in the cherry blossoms, then it's like the full circle moment you have set
Hmm.
up to this payoff, and so now he can be de-escalated through that idea. But instead you just don't do any of that at all. No
Yeah.
legwork.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer that these scripts are ending up the way they are, and that they're getting hacked to pieces because they decide partway through filming that they're just changing everything.
Yeah.
Writing is hard, and
Hmm.
putting together a feature film that succinctly explains everything that's going on over a 2 hour period while also having the action sequences and all that other kind of stuff. That's not it's not something you can just like, hey, chat GPT, write me Captain America 4, and it just spits out a perfect movie.
Yeah.
So anytime you go into rewrites, that it complicates things. I think at the end of the movie, when the credits rolled, there were 5 credited screenwriters
Yeah.
on this movie. You can't tell me that there's a vision there, right?
No.
If it was TV, I'd say, okay, yeah, because there's like a big writer's room because they have to do 10 hours of material or whatever. But for a movie like this, you don't need 5 screenwriters. That just
Yeah.
tells you that someone wrote this part. They said part of that's good, part of it sucks, and they hired somebody else to fill in the gaps and all that, which is where things start to get complicated. But that being said, I think moving forward, you texted me this before you even saw the movie. You were like, they showed a trailer for a Marvel movie that looks much better than this one right before this one, which is the
Yep.
Thunderbolts movie. And
Yep.
apparently, that film didn't go through any reshoots, according to Scuttlebutt on the internet. Fantastic Four does not seem like it went through any significant rewrites or changes. They had a bunch of personnel changes before the
Hmm.
movie got started. Like
Yep.
they couldn't land on a director or whatever early on. But then once they did, they wrote the movie, they shot the movie, and it's done.
Yep.
James Gunn's Superman, very singular vision, right? He wrote, he directed, they shot. I think they said they had 2 days of pickups for that movie, and that's it. So I'm hoping that this weird post COVID superhero time where stuff's just kind of hack job together is over.
Yeah.
But only time will tell.
Yeah. There's very much a shoot first, aim second type of mentality to this movie, where it's like, we're going to make the next Captain America movie, and maybe the script isn't fully there yet, but we'll find it. It's like the Michael Scott thing. Sometimes I start a sentence and I have no idea where it's
Right.
going.
Yeah.
I hope I'll find it along the way. It's just like that, where they didn't know what movie they were making going
Yeah.
into it. And then once it started to test poorly, they started making changes to see if they could fix it. And
Yeah.
it became this Frankenstein's monster of a movie. It kind of reminds me of like The Rise of Skywalker. Same kind of thing
Sure.
happened, where
Yeah.
they said they didn't really have a shooting script as they started the movie. They were just filming the scenes that they knew would eventually go into the final product. And
Yeah.
that's not a way to make a movie.
No.
I think if you look at like the Lord of the Rings way back when, Peter Jackson has discussed how with the first trilogy he was given so much time and runway to plan those movies and make
Hmm.
sure that everything was perfect before they went and shot it, especially because they were shooting them all at the same time. It had to be coordinated.
Yeah.
But then for the Hobbit films, they brought him in way, way late in the process and just told him to figure it out. And he didn't have a ton of time, and that's why those ended up much worse
Yeah.
than the original Lord of the Rings
I mean,
films.
take a look at somebody like Christopher Nolan. He takes anywhere from 3 to 4 years in between his films. Like
Yep.
Oppenheimer came out in 23. His new Odyssey movie doesn't come out till 26.
Hmm.
Like and everything is meticulously planned. Scripts are done. They're proofed. Everybody knows that they're actually good before they go into production. Disney with Marvel and Star Wars and all these properties, they have dates on the calendar for these
Yep.
movies, and the movies are announced before scripts are even written,
Yeah.
which is a crazy way to do business. But
Yeah.
uh, for the MCU, it worked for a long time. They had a lot of big hits and a lot of movies that were, considered good to great. And I think you can only do that for so long. You can only do that
Hmm.
tightrope walk for a finite period of time before it just kind of starts biting you in the butt. So,
And then you just Hail Mary it and bring back Robert Downey Jr. and pray it works out.
but here's the thing: I bet that movie is probably going to be good
Yeah, because they
because
probably have
they're going
had
to
the script
well,
ready.
they have a writer
Yeah.
who has written four of the most successful Marvel movies of all time, and he's the only writer on the project.
Yeah.
And you have two directors who shot four of the most successful Marvel movies of all time, and they're going to be the directors. They have enough stroke now that they can fight back probably against the machine or whatever. So it's probably going to end up being halfway decent, and then everybody will be like, "Oh, Marvel's back, we did it," and it's like, well,
And they just go
because
right back to what they did before.
right, they're breaking all their own rules, and then they're going to make good movies, and then they're not going to learn that lesson probably, and just go back to reshoot city. But
Yep. But we got stuck with this one, and it's not great.
yeah, it's unfortunate because I liked it enough because of the actors that are in it and the performances that they give. There's this couple little things that if they didn't do, like, they held the movie back by doing things the way that they did.
I I don't think there's much of a movie there, to be honest. I think there's little hints of ideas that were considered along the way and a couple of good actors, but in terms of it being an overall story and vision, there's just nothing.
Yeah, I would love to see the original cut of the film. I'm curious to see if the
Even if
original
it
script
sucked, like at least maybe it had an idea instead of
that
just
went from A
nothing.
to Z, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'd rather have a bad movie that tries than a bad movie that doesn't.
beats me. But
Yep.
either way, that's going to do it for this video. It's a real downer of a discussion here, but hey, I have high hopes for Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, and Superman this year, and also the Daredevil show that's coming out on Disney Plus. So that's going to do it for this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop us a comment below. Let us know what you think. If you liked this discussion, not because of all the negativity, but because of the valid issues that are persistent in Hollywood, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you like movies and TV shows. Make sure to check out all of our Severance videos. We are reviewing that weekly and having a lot of fun talking about that show, which is a show that doesn't play down to its audience and it makes you pay attention, which is pretty awesome. And I think we're also going to review Scott Derrickson's new movie, The Gorge, that's on Apple TV now, starring Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy. So be on the lookout for all of those and so much more, and we'll see you guys in the next video.